of Kittens and Broken Things. Chapter 2. Val put her head in her hands, imagining the destruction to her career. Liara opened her mouth and then closed it, realizing they were in a conference room. High risk of monitoring and open channels. Liara flashed with bright shame at being caught so very much off guard. She looked at Commander Shepard, who Liara had barely met but knew of by reputation. Even on her isolated digs, she'd kept up with galactic events. She'd only known her for a few hours, but the inventive military genius she had encountered could not at all be squared with visions of sugar plums. Liara had no idea what a sugar plum was. Neither did Shepard, but it described her well. Liara lost her smile and held up her hands again. Commander Shepard, I am so very sorry. Perhaps this is something best discussed privately. Again, if you would permit. Lal stared at her. It seemed they were both near trembling. Lal thought, let the indiscreet about to fall Asari back in your head, or let her catalog your sins out loud. Lal closed her eyes, then opened them, sighed, and said, all right. Liara did her black-eyed thing again. Lal couldn't help but ask, what does embrace eternity mean, anyway? She got emotional content from Liara, which was interesting. It's something we say. Lal considered and wondered if she was leaking skepticism into Liara's brain. You can't tell the human? Liara was flustered. What? No, maybe yes. It has to do with the goddess and our connection to all things. Lal thought, a little pretentious for going diving in my head for memories? I didn't embrace eternity. I need you to promise that I am not embracing the end of my career. What did you see? Liara stuttered. A mental stutter. Seemed there was a flow to emotion, and it got all choppy. Liara said between waves of apprehension, potential images of being abandoned, of being taken by Saren's people without protection. Commander Shepard, you just saved my life. I was taken by surprise. I don't know any humans. Please forgive me. Lal was calming down slightly. Okay, I'm sorry. I panicked. Commander Shepard, you have a mission. Whatever I discovered inside your mind is confidential. I promise. It was loud. Lal could believe that. Just try living inside here. Okay, please try to remember me as a badass and not whatever else you saw. Liara responded with a flow of solemn promise. Of course, if you... I am about to faint. Oh! Oops. Lal supported Liara to the medbay and asked Dr. Chakwas to immediately let her know if there was something she could do, like if they needed to reroute to an Asari base to allow Dr. T'Soni to recuperate. Please tell me she needs to go to an Asari base. Unfortunately, Dr. Chakwas was convinced Dr. T'Soni would be fine, and that her understanding of Asari physiology and medicine would be sufficient to this task. Lal stood nearby, watching, chewing on her thumb. So, she'd nearly broken the Asari. Tally would die if she got a suit breach. Ashley might kill Rex and Garrus in their sleep out of loyalty to humans. Rex might just kill them all for fun. She was currently hiding from Caden. This was it. This was her crew. She remembered she had private quarters and walked fast to them. She stopped and looked around at the cheerful and suddenly damning sight. She'd made a mistake here. It was obvious. She'd gone shopping on the Citadel before leaving, over-exuberance making her purchasing choices very questionable. Brightly colored pillows, colored light strings. She loved them. They had to go. She thought of this space as a sanctuary and had tried to take advantage of it, but it had been a bad idea. There were stuffed animals. There was this adorable stuffed Varen. She smiled. No smiling. I have to get this crap out of here. She imagined dismantling every last incriminating bit of evidence and couldn't stand the idea. She could not defluff them. That was sacrilege. Okay, storage. She had to pack this crap away right now. All the relief and expansive joy of her first command collapsed in on itself with Liara's near-miss exposure, with the fact that she'd have to block entry to her quarters with her life. Stupid. She still picked up the Varen and hugged it. She'd told people when cornered that they were gifts from children she'd rescued, which was a lie and lower than the mine they'd just escaped. It was plausible when there was only one stuffed animal, well concealed, but this was a display of poor impulse purchases. But she loved them so much. She squeezed the Varen, whose name was Sprinklebits, and apologized for putting her, again, in the dark. Someday we can be together, Sprinklebits, but today is not that day. She bit her lip. She was going to need storage. She left her quarters looking determined, managing to avoid any possibility of Caden catching her eye, or anything else. No. Opaque storage. Maybe she could just ship them to herself. She had no permanent address. Storage on the Citadel? There had to be a way. I promise, Sprinklebits, I will find a way for us to be together. I just have to find Saren first. One elevator ride down and she was in the Mako Bay. She went to the back and started rummaging around. There had to be some empty crates here. Opaque, empty crates. She maybe should have gone to records, found a spreadsheet of inventory. In fact, she was doing that tonight, reading up on the inventory of the ship. Where to hide stuffed animals and pillows that she was going to miss. She was suddenly not just worried, but sad.
Garrus had been absorbed in the maintenance of the Mako. After Therum, it was a singed mess. Garrus had some experience with Mako models. He had never seen a better Mako driver than Shepard. She'd managed to drive as though the treads followed a magnetic rail. Very impressive. Still, lava and a lot of Geth shooting at them for a few hours made dents and tweaks some undercarriage. He'd adopted the maintenance of the Mako because he had no other job, and that made him crazed. He wanted to contribute, wanted to have a purpose here. He wanted to fit in. Shepard made him feel safer than he was accustomed to feeling. She was steady and measured, level-headed, and best he'd seen in a firefight. Better than he could do, certainly. It was very strange being on a human vessel. A lot of things were new to him. He appreciated the synergy of Turian and human innovation in creating the Normandy, was proud to be a part of this mission. His mission, really, to bring down Saren. Now, instead of Palin saying no in condescending and suppressive tones to whatever Garrus brought forward, Shepard had been sold before he'd met her. Garrus had gone through his military service, but there had been no active war at the time. The First Contact War had been over, and most of his military service had consisted of training and public works. Moving to CSEC had been destined, what his father had wanted. Leaving was hard on Garrus's sense of duty, but a relief to his sense of justice. He was no longer stuck at a desk, quietly sequestered and invalidated out of a promotion or assignment of meaningful cases, consigned to a label of ranting conspiracy theorist. His father was livid. Not that that was new, really. It seemed as though Garrus's life had been a series of fending off displeasure and disapproval. Shepard was different. He had expected a hard-bitten and razor-edged human such that he'd heard about in the First Contact War, unpredictable and vicious. What he'd gotten was not that. He really didn't know what or who she was. Right now, she was picking her way slowly through some of the storage in the back of the bay. He kept some of his tools there. She was biting her lip and her brows were drawn together. Whatever it was that had Commander Shepard worried when she'd faced down Colossus and Krogan with even determination made him shiver. He stepped closer to her. Commander? She squeaked, and he felt immediately guilty. She slammed her hand in a container she'd had open, and he felt even guiltier. Her scent was... He'd been in close quarters with this woman, knew how she was on a mission, when she was armored, when she was speaking. The metal in her eyes matched the metal of her scent, not literally, but figuratively, hard, cold, and flexible. Now he was going to have to get accustomed to the fact that humans had no subvocals, could not hear subvocals, and she maybe could not tell that he was trying to be helpful. He had not yet learned to pitch his voice at the right level of human hearing, and he'd obviously been too quiet. He thought what he was smelling was fear, and she had every right to it. Anybody could tell this was a dysfunctional crew, seemingly gathered at random without true council support, very likely an intended trap to make sure the first human Spectre, who was really the second human Spectre, would fail. Maybe even the Normandy was set for sacrifice, considering the political tensions between council races. He knew well enough the hierarchy was under pressure to downplay their cooperation with humans because it was being used as a wedge to drive the humans into a council seat. He would not allow that to color his mission, their mission. He instinctively moved to block Rex's likely disinterested gaze. He was not going to take a chance here. She turned, regained her balance, and her face was flushed. Did he make her nervous? Despite her insistence on Turian and human cooperation, had he not proven himself? He'd try harder. He said a little louder after clearing his throat. Commander, is there anything I can help you with here? It looks like a mess, but there's some order to it. Her spine straightened and she smiled. He didn't know human expressions well. Was she trying to protect him from whatever was bothering her? Most likely. It was none of his business. He had faith that whatever it was, she'd find her way through. She didn't need him indulging his inappropriate curiosity. She was so very tiny. Sometimes he looked at her and could not imagine how in any realm of the spirits humans had survived the First Contact War. Then she smelled like metal, and he only heard her voice, seemingly taking up all the space sound could take. Right now, she smelled like prey. His own spine straightened. Get your nose in order, Vicarian. Don't make her reprimand you for being intrusive. Your commander is not prey. No wonder she's nervous. You see her as tiny and delicate, and she can't help but know she's seen that way. She swallowed and said,
Oh, hey. Sorry, didn't realize you were there. I really should be checking this through ship's inventory, but I couldn't resist getting my hands dirty. Inventory could only tell me so much, and maybe some spot checks would make sure that inventory stays accurate.
Is your hand okay? She wasn't bleeding, but human bruises were impressive. She had quite a few. Her expression made him see her as a woman. Not a human, not a specter, a woman. A bruised woman who smelled like fear. His spine straightened a little further. I'm fine. It tried to bite, but... His mind blanked. It what?
She felt massively lame and indicated the container. Lid, teeth, bite.
He forced a laugh.
She would like someone to drive over her with the Mako right about now.
Are you looking for anything in particular? I could help.
She thought of Sprinkle Bits and thought she'd perhaps shred her collection and flush it down the head, strip by strip, to teach her to not be so stupid. She was not only a coward, but a potential and dedicated stuffed animal murderer. Clearly a Turian confuser. He was huge and intimidating and blocking the light. And now, in a really unfortunate confluence of thoughts, she wanted a stuffed Turian because there's something wrong with her. Several things wrong with her. She had an internal searing moment of sweeping away every last bit of internal static that she could, and then she said, "You finding everything you need?"
Yes, ma'am. The Normandy is well stocked.
She smiled, glad about that. Everyone treating you okay?
He nodded. Absolutely. I hope my service has been satisfactory.
Garrus, you saved my life at least 4 times today. I'd say so.
Only 4? It had been 6, but she'd been out front.
4 that I saw. You want to tell me about the other ones?
No, ma'am. I'm sure you can figure those out on your own. Seems petty to keep score when the whole place exploded.
Well, yeah. That's what happens when you get creative with mining lasers. I can occasionally be petty.
Me too.
Let me know if you need anything, okay? I want to know if you have problems.
I will, Commander. He wanted to say he'd like it if she did the same. Spirits help him. He wanted to ask her if she needed help getting something off a high shelf to come find him.
She left, deciding to directly address inventory and find a large, empty, opaque box. Then possibly put herself into it and never come out. Novaria had frozen and shattered Lal's heart, helpless as the grief on Liara's face, as Benezia's struggle was revealed. Little wing and darkness. Lal wanted to fall to her knees as Liara had, taking her mother's hand, but although Benezia could no longer call Geth or commandos to her, the Rachni were still a threat. Lal and Garrus eyed the entrances to the room, listening for the slide of doors, weapons ready. She almost shot the reanimated body of a commando, the startled, "Oh," her only comment. She stared at the jerking, eerie poetry that was the Rachni Queen's puppetry and saw that the Rachni Queen was glowing, vibrating, harmonizing with discussions of music. Tears began to stream down Lal's face as the Queen told her that her children had been severed from her and must be killed. Too many lost mothers in this room, and Lal was unable to turn when Garrus and Liara discussed the benefits and drawbacks of setting loose a monster whose children spit acid that ate through their armor, whose children had killed so many people, whose ancestors had nearly overrun the galaxy. Could she hold this one singer responsible for the sins of her ancestors and offspring? Lal moved her hand to wipe away tears, though it was the furtive movement that mimicked rubbing her eyes. She set the Queen free. She was sure the Queen told the truth. Lal stood, panting, after the chamber had closed and the possibility of calling the Queen back or reversing the choice was gone. They still had to get out of here. She clamped down on the grief, on the certainty, unable to express either. Now she needed to express the clearest path to survival of the most people and the death of the most Rachni. Liara had made it back to her feet, her mother's body laid out in the same way that Lal had laid her mother and father together, straight and flat with hands clasped, though Benezia only had her own hands to join. Lal could not help but take a moment to reaffirm her choice. I can't condemn her to extinction. I don't think she was lying. I believe her. Liara said, "There is enough death in this facility. I don't know what is going to happen later, but if that is your choice, I stand with you." Garrus was a little slower, had provided a counterpoint to Lal's insistence that the Rachni Queen be permitted to live. Lal could not even look directly at him, afraid she'd begin to cry, dissolve, and sink through the floor.
It's done, Shepard. We've got to get out of here before we're done too. I wouldn't have taken that chance. but I will back you up while you take it.
She closed her eyes and gathered her bruised and aching limbs, the tearing weight of the rifle in her hands. Thank you. I can't. She wanted to say she couldn't express what that meant to her, but she shouldn't waste time on her feelings, no matter how overwhelming, no matter how immediate. She shouldered her rifle to take some weight off her trembling limbs. She squeezed Liara's shoulder, and Liara nodded solemnly. Lal managed to meet Garrus's eyes, and he met hers with his determined, steady gaze. They headed toward the hot labs to finish the mission and allow the remainder of the people in this facility to leave alive. The only way back out was a searing, spitting field of experimentally feral arachni, with Shepard insisting on being the last one out of the room, Liara speeding ahead and clearing a path with biotics, Garrus, unable to watch both Liara and Lal, frantic, with his long stride clearing his own path, reaching back to Lal and yanking her through the door. Arachni's stinger had lodged in the back joint of Lal's leg armor and breached the seal, burrowing into the muscle of her calf, spilling acid along the surface of her skin. She would not scream. Tried to run, but failed after 2 attempts at steps, and then began to hop.
Garrus growled, hadn't let go of her arm, took one look at the pulsing chitin still pumping venom and acid into her muscle, and carried her toward the tram.
Then she threw up on him. Then she fainted.
Garrus's muscles were seared from the run, from the exhausting ordeal of clearing the facility that had been overrun by fossilized monsters history told them had been eliminated. Shepard was limp in his arms, spittle and foam and vomit. The scent of her acid-burned skin clotted in his nasal plates. He got her to the tram seats, flipped her to her stomach, he and Liara staring at the still pulsing chitin relic of arachni stinger buried in her flesh through her armor. He did not know what to do. Pull it out and she could bleed to death. She had possibly already lost the leg. He didn't know human anatomy. He didn't know the risks. He told Liara, "Contact Dr. Chakwas. I've got to get her armor off. I don't know what to do. Ask her."
Liara stared for another horrified moment, and then used her omni-tool, did as she was ordered, thankful that Garrus had the presence of mind to function through the horror. Dr. Chakwas talked him through pulling out the reason why Krogan had been uplifted as warriors, the smell of bubbling flesh making Liara sure she was not suited to a soldier's life. Lal began to have convulsions, and Dr. Chakwas guided Garrus through using what medical supplies they had, the remainder of their metagel, and the use of Garrus's overheated sniper rifle to cauterize the wound, making Liara even more lightheaded as she clung to a support bar. Garrus's voice was calm as he gave Liara orders, relayed requirements to the Normandy, had Joker come pick them up, and the Mako carried Lal out, careful of her leg, careful of everything as she was pale, green and gray.
He carried her to the medbay and did not consider leaving, glared at Dr. Chakwas when she suggested it, and compromised by sitting out of the way. He'd had a few spatters of acid, but they were all easily treated by the readily available metagel once he'd reached the medbay, slathering on a few raw spots on his hide. He made sure Liara was uninjured. She had a few burns, but nothing requiring the doctor's attention. Garrus carefully checked before he released Liara to get out of her armor, it being more prone to corrosion than the full armor Garrus wore, the protection of his plates. He sat, gritting his teeth until Dr. Chakwas assured him that she had salvaged Lal's leg, Commander Shepard's leg. He took his first whole breath and thanked Dr. Chakwas gravely, then sat by Lal's bedside, staring down at a small, pale human who insisted on taking up the rear position. Commander Shepard. Commander Shepard, who had let loose the arachni again. He shook his head, buried his face in his hands, and waited for her to wake up. He needed her to smell like metal again, and not bubbling, cauterized skin. He needed to not be terrified. She had stabilized, and Dr. Chakwas had excused herself to get a meal. Garrus had promised to alert her if anything happened. She screamed. It was Lal screaming and not Commander Shepard, and he knew it wasn't from the pain she was in now, but remembered pain. She was waking up and couldn't stop herself, and he knew that feeling. He took her hand and squeezed, tried to yank her forward as he had in the hot labs, bring her to where it wouldn't hurt anymore. Had she screamed like that on Lindwar? Had she screamed like that on Elysium? Had she wanted to scream like that as her leg boiled off?
La woke and choked off the sound, was aware that her hand was being held, turned her head and saw hulking, angry Turian. Don't cry. Don't scream. She gritted her teeth and stared at the ceiling, unable to speak.
He let go of her hand and gave her a calm sit-rep. You're back on the Normandy. Dr. Chakwa saved your leg. Peak 15 is being evacuated. No further casualties.
She heard reprimand in every single word out of his mouth, felt it in his withdrawn hand, in the numbness below her hip, in the scream that echoed in her ears and hadn't been cleared from her head. She maintained the grit in her teeth, clenching until her jaw hurt, until she felt her teeth would crack. She said with the most economy she could, desperate to escape, cowardly enough to use her leg as an excuse. Thank you. I owe my life to your quick thinking. How long will I be down?
2 days at least. Skin graft needs to be immobilized.
Thank you. You're in charge of the Normandy.
He wanted more. He wanted to see her eyes, see the color come back into her skin. He wanted to hold her hand again. But he'd gotten something else he wanted. She smelled like metal. The clenched jaw and taut throat, head turned away, made him say, "Of course." He said, because he could not just leave it at that, "Thank you, Commander." He meant it from a depth he could not express.
She couldn't hear it as anything other than a courtesy. And then she had no more voice to share.